I'm Cara Sinclair. I am your host for the Wellness Leadership Podcast. Starting off as an Carstens alumni for the Diploma in Somatology and your Advanced Diploma in Dermal Aesthetics, I've had extensive experience in therapy and in management abroad. My heart is in management, definitely, and my heart is for students to be able to profit from this industry. Can you be a good therapist, but can you make this your vocation? That is what this podcast is all about. Why should you listen to the Wellness Leadership Podcast? Because every conversation has been chosen with purpose. These topics were not selected because they are trending, nor were they chosen at random. By analyzing hundreds of structured workplace reflections, we identified the leadership themes that appeared most consistently and shaped the first conversations around them. As a higher education institution with over 48 years of excellence in beauty, aesthetics, spa and wellness education, we prepare professionals for practice, not only theory. This series brings together academic expertise, real-world industry experience, and authentic workplace insight. This is not a lecture, and it is more than a conversation. It is designed to help you understand the leadership principles behind successful businesses and translate them into practical actions you can apply, whether you're leading a team or preparing for your first leadership role. Subscribe to gain fresh perspective, practical insight, and leadership ideas that help strengthen the future of the wellness industry. Hello and welcome to the first episode of the Wellness Leadership Podcast by the Carstens Academy, where we go behind the scenes of wellness and we get to experience the industry from our industry expert perspective. And this year we've been working quite closely with our students at Carstens during their work integrated learning hours. So work integrated learning is a time where our students for the first time experience the industry not as students, but as working professionals. So our research that kickstarted this podcast, we did 180 interviews with students, or feedback sessions rather, where we spoke about how they experienced the industry, the day-to-day operations, the challenges that emerge from that in real businesses with real clients. Now, Riëtte is our marketing head at Carstens, and she's also the head of our research team for this podcast. And Riëtte, you are a qualified somatologist, but you also have your bachelor's in marketing and business administration. When we look at this research, before we look at the topics that emerged or our feedback from our students, what were you expecting to see from this research?
Well, Cora, firstly, you would think as a student who have only had 1 year or 2 years of academic training, they would firstly talk about their craft and their technical skills and working with clients, and that would come up. So what came out was actually they were struggling with the things that was happening around them in the business, more the spa and the salon environment. Leadership and business practices that affected not only them, but they were also able to identify how it affected the client experience, the business success. They expressed how the cause and effect, how it would make the business function better, and also where it delivered the opposite.
When you look at the information that you've gathered, are there themes that kind of come up in terms of what they experienced, the problems that emerged?
Yes, and because it was deep questions, there's actually a lot of themes. So there's so much for us to talk about. But if I really just have to summarize the leading ones, we keep seeing the same patterns about how bookings created pressure, how bookings and scheduling affected many other areas in the operational space, and how it was a leadership function, not just an administrative task. Therapists working with outbreaks and not that in and of itself was a negative experience, but also how that impacted customer service and other areas that they had to focus on to deliver success for that business. Hygiene standards that, even though it was understood and practiced, but how that easily falls away the minute the pressures start building up. And then communication was also a massive theme. And I think that is because communication is something in our business that happens in shop front. So it's naturally going to be significant, or the impact will be significant on how we communicate with each other, not only our clients.
So really, instead of a lack of skill or a lack of experience or comfortability within the industry, we're seeing more of a lack of leadership or a leadership problem within our industry collectively.
Well, all that is what that would touch them first. Mm-hmm. That is what they felt first. Our classroom practices are very extensive. So by the time they work on real clients, they actually are already confident. So I think naturally that is why the leadership and the business management was felt more intensely by students because it was their very first job exposure. So they are very perceptive of what they see around them, which is different to what they saw in a classroom setting. It's quite an eye-opener for them.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
So let's have a look at why the Isaac Carstens Academy wanted to make this a conversation. When we look at the research, why do we have to talk about it? Why is it an important topic for our industry? And we're speaking today to Yolandé. So Yolandé is our CEO of Isaac Carstens. Now, she has over 30 years of experience in education, in teaching, and then as a therapist, of course. So a very good all-round knowledge of our industry. Yolandé, when we look at the research that comes up, why do you think this is such an important topic? Why should we be talking about this?
Well, Cara, with 30 years of experience, I can tell you, and I think a lot of the listeners would know, that the wellness industry really have evolved over the past few years at a very fast rate. And we've seen so many changes. We've seen the number of businesses have grown. We've seen the size of businesses in the wellness industry that have grown. We've seen our clients' expectations change. They now look at TikTok and they look at YouTube and they see all of these treatments, and this is the expectations that they've got when they come into the salon. But then we've also seen that the marketing has become more complex. So the arena that we're working in is much more complex than what we used to have. Unfortunately, I think if you look at the feedback that we're getting, it might be that our leadership development has not really evolved at the same pace as what the wellness industry have grown. So in essence, that becomes a problem, because we need to look at our leadership within our salons to make sure that we continue with this growth that we are experiencing. Previously, excellence in wellness was equated to excellent treatment. So if you did an excellent treatment, and if your salon gave excellent treatments to the client, people will say you're now going to be successful. Unfortunately, that isn't good enough anymore. We need to look further. So if you look at sustainability in your business, there's a few things that you need to look at. Number one, how do you manage your people? How do you look after the people? And this is what we see coming from the research. Two, how do you design your systems? Overbooking, scheduling. There's so many systems with AI now out there that you can use that can make it so much more easy for you as a salon. How do you handle the pressure? What happens if something goes wrong? And as a leader, how do you deal with that pressures and problem solving in your salon? And then I think very important is, how consistently are you managing the quality within your salon? Because those are the things that will make you successful. So what we're seeing through the eyes of our students, if we look at these research, is that leadership capabilities are now one of the key factors when we look at whether your salon or your clinic will thrive or whether you are merely just surviving in the end of the day. So at Isaac Carstens, we've always said that our vision is to really uplift the wellness industry, and we want to participate in this actively. We want to see growth within the wellness industry. But we've realized now you cannot elevate the wellness industry if we don't take one or two steps back and really look at elevating leadership within this industry as well.
So important. I think we're all of the opinion that the industry has changed so quickly and has grown exponentially in the last 15 or 20 years. But this is so important to back that up with leadership. Is our leadership growing together with our industry? Is it keeping up with the needs of our industry right now? And is it supporting longevity in our industry? Really, our client journey and our client experience, is that being backed not just with our exceptional treatment, but with exceptional leadership? So as is the norm with Isaac Carstens Academy, it's not just a subjective conversation that we're having today. It really is objective research that we're talking about. And going back to our student experience or emerging professional experience, we look at the industry today through a research lens. So Riëtte, what makes the research different for this podcast, I feel, is the source. We're going directly to our students who are fresh into the industry, some of them not even finished with their studies yet, right? Can you explain why this view is so valuable, why we need to hear from our students?
One would think that in order to create the topics or formulate the topics that would mostly benefit our industry would be from those who have the most experience. They are significant when it comes to helping us unpack and offer solutions and education. But what makes it so valuable is just think about your very first job you've ever had. How open you were, how unbiased, how uninfluenced you were about what has just become normalized in that specific industry. You came in realizing this needs to change. This I relate to, that I don't. And then it falls by the way because it's just, but this is how we do things. So getting information or feedback, rather, in-depth feedback from people who were, students, but their very first job experience, and such a broad range also, because some worked in spa, some worked in salon, some worked in wellness sanctuary, aesthetic clinics. It was so broad. So it really covered the entire sort of wellness scope. They were very honest, and it was anonymous, firstly, so they could be honest. No business or student was exposed in the feedback. But they haven't normalized the dysfunction yet. That for me is meaningful. And that is what leads this content. So it might feel basic, like scheduling and booking. I mean, why don't we talk about something way more complex, like finance management, which is not something therapists really train in depth in their education. Scheduling and booking, so basic, but so many of our students highlighted that as this is why the business failed. This is why the business was successful. So why don't we step back and really unpack those basics? I think that is what is going to make the content that we deliver here a bit different.
And Riëtte, from an academic perspective, this is where reflexive practice becomes very powerful and valuable for us, because the students are no longer just observing what they see there. They're starting to analyze, they're starting to question what they see. And what we need to realize, they're starting to build their own identity in terms of leadership while they're there. So whether we want to know it or not, our students are now deciding, this is the type of leader I want to be, or this is the type of leader I don't want to be. So this reflexive practice that is coming in is really so valuable in shaping the future leaders in our industry.
And we could keep this in the classrooms. it certainly is going to be used in classroom, and we do have business management as part of subjects in somatology. And we have a salon and spa management NKF level 7 advanced diploma. So it really becomes content that can turn academic into reflective conversations. But we are very passionate about also bringing it out a little bit further through platforms like this.
I think coming back to the research and through to what the students shared with us, it's such a raw, unfiltered opinion. We're really getting the whole picture, the big picture. Firstly, because like you said, it's anonymous. They felt quite comfortable sharing their entire experience without really placing blame or shifting blame onto any specific industry or business, but to share the collective experience around leadership. And on top of that, our students are still unbiased, as you said. They haven't learned those bad practices. And even more so, what I often see is we become desensitized to our industry and really to the lifeblood of our industry, which is our client journey and our client experience. We get so revenue driven or into our practices that we really don't focus on our soft skills. So here we're seeing students who are still very aware of that and still now feel comfortable to share that information, which is crucial. It is vital for us to share and to see and to discuss.
And leadership is listening to the fresh minds.
100%. And I think to bring things into perspective, so we're sending the students out, they've got all the theory knowledge of how things should happen. We've all realized that what you learn in theory and what happens in practice is not always the same story. But there's a midway between that. So they need to also, when they reflect, they need to realize that things won't always be 100% what we've taught you in class maybe. But this is right and that is wrong. And I think that is what is so valuable. Students now have to go out, they have to reflect on what they see, and they have to realize when is it okay to bend the rules slightly in practice because of a timing issue or because of whatever the issue might be on that specific day. And what is not okay. And as long as they come back, and this is what we clearly see, they come back and they say, this is what is not okay when we see it. And yeah, I think that is of enormous value for our industry.
And in leadership, to know these practices are okay to change. Yeah. I firmly believe it's like getting your license, driving your car. You have to know all the rules of the road by heart. But when you have your own car, you have then the confidence to drive in stressful situations. And as therapists, we step into that role as well. Good leadership equips us to know, here I can have my own approach, but here I really need to stick to what I've been taught, and to give you the confidence to distinguish that as well.
And it was interesting, the difference between the first year or the second year students. So we interviewed second year students after their first year experience, which was very raw. And then we interviewed third year students to reflect on their second year. And the same patterns emerged, but the younger students didn't quite know how to name things. But because the questions were rich and they had to write almost paragraphs and think, we could read what they were trying to say. So they didn't have the business theoretical training yet to name certain things, but at the same time they had the ability to process what they were experiencing.
It's almost that the depth of understanding. And I think that is why 3 years is so crucial specifically for somatology students as well, because as they develop in their 3 years, you'll see in the first year they almost want to match what I've learned to what happened there. And if there's no match, they don't have the skill maybe yet to understand why. Whereas when it comes to the third year will now tell you, okay, this does not meet up. So either we need to look at what we teach in theory, or we need to now say this is not right and not acceptable.
It's very significant to me that it still lifts out, even as you said, they don't know how to properly name it yet. Still, they fully experience a shift in leadership or a lack in leadership, even if we don't cognitively comprehend what is missing here, there is a feeling of lack of support and a lack of guidance and a lack of structure. And of course, the client feels that as well as they step into the treatment room. All the more reason why we have to discuss it. It's such an important foundation for a good industry business, right?
They were very much aware of the client experience at that fresh young age or first experience. I think they were even more attentive to it because they weren't used to it. So they were very attentive to the impact on the clients.
So Riëtte, let's go back. Let's take a step back and look at the research collectively. What are we learning from our future industry leaders here? What are they saying?
Okay, so there were a few patterns, and I'll mention a few that came out the strongest. So first of all, the first is that leadership shows up directly in the client experience. One student specifically said, when things were chaotic behind the scenes, clients could feel it. So leadership isn't abstract. It is seen and felt and experienced in the daily operations of the business and in every client interaction. Secondly, it was around timing and scheduling. Students very clearly linked chaotic bookings with rushed environments, unhappy clients, and diminished trust. So they saw repeated issues with double bookings, overbooking for profit, and therapists without any breaks, and the expectations around retail and around customer service and the impact it would have on that. One comment that stood out was, everything falls apart when bookings were not properly managed. So overbooking wasn't seen as efficiency. It was experienced as unethical practice by the students, if not properly managed. Another strong theme was communication. Students spoke about conflict being handled in front of clients, gossip between staff, and instructions constantly changing. So communication was a very sensitive topic because in a salon and spa environment, it is a front of shop space. So there isn't always the opportunity to engage with each other in a back office. So our leadership and our communication skills rather has to be even better because it is all happening in front of clients. Students were very aware of when hygiene standards dropped, and they didn't interpret that as a lack of knowledge. They saw it as a lack of accountability, which we are very proud of because we work really hard to train them, about the importance of hygiene. But one student said, it isn't about ignorance. It's about not enforcing standards. So they want to see what they were taught to follow through in the industry. So if we were to rank, and just to give you a little bit of a snapshot of the amount of times and the frequency these patterns were mentioned, client care and experience ranked number 1. It was mentioned 445 times approximately. Time scheduling and booking management was mentioned 194 times. So you can imagine the impact that has on a business and how often a salon would rely on a basic receptionist role to manage that, where it's actually an advanced leadership and management skill that is required because the whole business backbone is formed on that. So it makes sense that came up second. Then third was communication and leadership behavior, 141 times approximately. Systems, technology, admin processes, 141 times. Hygiene and infection control, 131 times. Staff well-being, workplace culture, 58 times. Retail, sales, and commercial skills, 46 times. And ethics, scope, and regulatory awareness, 33 times.
Fantastic. A lot of information to work through, right? So I think it helps to group it into topics or themes as you've done. It is really significant to me how the client experience emerges, right? So client experience and definitely time management are very prominent subjects here. Why do you think that we see that, time pressure exposes leadership, or rather a lack of leadership, so quickly?
And I'm going to read this because it also came out. Because pressure removes pretense.
Sure.
And systems, values, and priorities become visible when things get busy. So it's easy to mask the cultural struggles that a business face when everything is smooth. But the minute things get chaotic, which happens often in our customer-facing environment, it shines through. So
I think, Riëtte, what we often see is if a good therapist that's been with a salon for a while, if that therapist gets promoted into a managerial position, I really don't think we spend enough time to train them and to provide them with the necessary skills to deal with all of these situations that you are pointing out now. Because in essence, yes, I know a lot of people will say you're born a leader or you're a natural leader, but leadership can be taught. And I think it's our responsibility as well that the moment that we put someone in that leadership position, that we make sure they've got the necessary skills to deal with things. How do I cope under pressure? How do I deal with this? Because now I'm not only managing myself in the cubicle, I'm managing a team, and I need to make sure that they are relaxed and that everything is smooth, and my clients don't see if something is not going according to plan. So once again, it comes down to leadership.
And if you think of other industries, they don't always work as directly with the clients than our therapist. We physically touch our clients. So leadership practices and how it impacts the therapist, it cannot not affect the client. When that therapist works on the client, that will be transmitted to the client. So in our industry, it's even more important.
Yeah.
100%. I really resonate with what you said about transitioning from therapy into a managerial role. I think when I stepped into management at Carstens, I realized that my experience, or rather my knowledge of management, really was only experiential, and I really felt the need for a bit more of a education-based knowledge around that. We might see practices and adopt practices, but it is so important to have a step back and to see what are good practices here and what would be the impact of the way that I approach things on my staff, because as you said, that energy is transmitted to the client, and that speaks directly to our revenue and to our longevity, and again, coming back to a sustainable future for wellness.
But it's exactly what Riëtte has said. We spend so much time teaching them the skill and how to do a facial, how to do a massage. But we forget that they also need that. We have it in our basic business practice, business management. But still, once they get out there, it's a completely different field. You really, the reality of being a manager is so much more, and I think that is where further training comes in, to say, let's equip you with enough skills so that you are confident in being a future leader for your team.
And management training and leadership training in a formalized sense matters. The experience is always going to be significant, but one thing that our industry never had was formalized, accredited training, and not just management and leadership. That is out there, but specifically salon and spa management and leadership. That is why you foresaw that need years ago, and we developed that accredited course.
Because like you said, it's different.
Yeah.
Working with people every single day, clients coming into your salon or patients like in a medical aesthetic practice, it's different than just being a shop assistant. You're working with people and you have to interact with those people and you have to guide your people as in how to manage and how to deal with those situations. So no, it is very important that we look forward and see the potential of having good leaders as part of your team.
I think it's so important for us to have that soft skill experience as well. You know, we're taught, like you said, to do massages or facials, but how we interact both with our clients, how we teach our therapists to interact with the clients, and how we interact with our team all play such a large role in how successful we can be and how it determines the example that we set for our staff going forward.
Because it's a skill that can be taught.
100%.
And that we need to realize it's a skill that can be taught.
So at the heart behind the discussion that we're having today and in our upcoming episodes is really to enact change and to elevate the wellness industry sustainably going forward. Yolandé, how does that look? How do we elevate the wellness industry sustainably? And what impact do you want to see from this podcast on our industry?
Cara, for me, the podcast almost it's twofold. First of all, I think what is brilliant is that we are providing the industry with real evidence-based feedback that we've received from various salon spas where our students have worked. So I think that is very valuable. And what we've seen now is specific focus on leadership to say all of these nitty-gritty things that we picked up really just comes down to leadership. And if we pay more attention to leadership, that is where we're going to have that impact. Secondly, is we really on the roll now to say we need to elevate leadership in this industry. And whether that is going to be through one of our formal programs that we do that, or whether it's going to be through short learning programs, we firmly believe in lifelong learning, or whether it's going to be through podcasts that is available to everyone. As a training institution, we feel we need to elevate leadership or create the awareness of how to elevate leadership within your own business, because I think in this industry we're never going to stop learning. And I think what was so important for me that came out of the research is that students are learning just as much from seeing what to do as what they are learning from seeing what not to do, and that is incredibly valuable for us as a training institution.
That's beautifully said. I think even just opening it as a conversation, making it a topic within our industry will create so much more awareness of it, because we are seeing that students are, from their leaders of today, from their environments, they are deciding how to go forward, how they will lead in the future, what practices to adopt and what not. And that is crucial. It's vital. So the series is so exciting. It's such an exciting topic. And as we go forward, we will unpack it even more, all of the data that we've looked at, and specifically in practice. So why the problems that emerge, why this happens, how it impacts our industry and our day-to-day operations. And then, of course, how our industry experts propose that we solve these problems. So we would like to elevate leadership in each respective challenge that we face in our research. So this benefits every person in the industry, right? Whether you're an educator, whether you're a therapist right now, if you're shifting from therapy into a managerial role, as is my experience, or whether you're wanting to move into entrepreneurship, if you want to start your own business, I think this information is so important going forward. And if you're working with employees, to know how to properly manage yourself and your staff for a sustainable culture and a sustainable business. So off the bat, Riëtte, I think what we're seeing in the research is really the impact that leadership has on our industry and on our therapists in the industry. And leadership really should be intentional. It should never be by default. And we, of course, don't have to be in a managerial position to lead. Anyone can lead from the position that they're in, but it should be an intentional thing. So as we go forward, we'll discuss more in detail the problems that arose within our research, and we'll focus primarily in our next episode on time management and operations within the spa system, which I'm very excited for. I quite enjoy that topic. And of course, all our other themes that we've seen in the research, as we spoke about hygiene, about the client journey, all of this plays such a vital role in our client experience. So together with our other industry experts, we'll dive deeper into the data that we've collected, or that Riëtte has collected for us in our 180 interviews that we did. And we were quite excited for these conversations. So for listeners to gain insight into that and to really be relevant and on par with our industry now, this is such a good topic to explore. And we'll also touch on a more structured approach. Of course, here we're having a informal conversation about it, and we are opening the conversation because it's really relevant. But I think going into a more academic approach can be vital if you're stepping into a managerial role or a leadership role within our industry. Like you said, we never want to stop learning.
So this is not going to be a classroom going forward. I think as an academic institution, we understand the balance that we need to bring, real world practice as well as academic content. So what we are aiming to do for all the episodes going forward is to bring in that balance, whether that will be in every podcast or whether it will be in certain ones. But we want to bring in an academic expert, a lecturer, people with business and management masters and doctoral degrees who can really deep dive into some of those topics. But we will also always bring in an industry practitioner expert, somebody with lots of experience in leadership roles to just bring back that information home and make it more digestible and practical. So we want listeners to be able to go back and implement what they've listened to and heard on this podcast. So we really want it to be educational. Our aim here is to elevate leadership within our industry. So that is what we are going to try and strive to achieve.
Because ultimately, the success of the wellness industry depends on quality leadership.
Exactly.